Hi, Rob here. This is purely for entertainment and amusement. The best advice I can give you is to not to do any of the things that I talk about. I remember when we used to have firecracker night. Actually, it was more like firecracker week. No, it was longer than that. Firecracker, as long as we had money and as long as the shops were open. That's how long firecracker went for. Some of us kept a stash. Some of us kids kept a stash. Really depended on how much money we had. We'd go to the local milk bar. We'd go to sometimes later on the newsagent, and we'd use our pocket money and we'd buy all the crackers we could get, and we'd keep them hidden. I'll talk about how we earned money in another video. Now, firecracker night, this tradition originated in England to commemorate the failed gunpowder plot of 1605. It was brought to Australia by British colonisers and in the 19th century. And what was this plot, you may well ask? You may well ask. The gunpowder plot of 1605 was a failed attempt by a group of English Catholics to assassinate King James I and blow up the Houses of Parliament on November 5th in, 1605. It was a popular tradition in Australia. We called it firecracker or Guy Fawkes night. Now, during the 1950s and the 60s, because of the rising number of accidents, I don't think they're actually deaths, but there were a lot of accidents, kids losing fingers, eyes, ears, nose, that sort of thing. It became pretty much illegal for Australians to own firecrackers. Local and state governments, sometimes sponsored by big business or local government, state, federal, would stage like a gala event. They still do it today. You can go and have a look at them setting off crackers. Trust me, it's not the same as doing it yourself. And basically they transfer the cost and fun from the individual to the taxpayer. Now, I remember going to a farm when I was 18. I had friends in a small town called Mangapla. Now, at that time had a population probably of 250 people. In the late 70s, we had an amazing bonfire. There was a straw scarecrow was made up. There was huge amounts of timber put around it. We'd have a barbecue. We'd have a few beers. In those days, we used to buy a slab. Now, that's what we called in Australia, a slab. If I remember correctly, it was about 24 cans of beer to a slab. I don't remember what it cost, but compared to today, it was nothing. And we would have a few drinks. Well, to be honest, we had a few drinks too many. And we would stay out all night until sometime in the early morning. Now, for family gatherings, that was a different event. The dads would be mostly in charge, and they'd let off skyrockets, and the skyrocket was either pushed into the ground or it was placed inside the neck of a beer bottle. Then it'd be set off, and everyone would sit back and go, "Whoa, yay!" So that's sort of a wonderful thing. The kids would have sparklers, and they'd run around waving them in the air, making shapes, diamonds, hearts, crosses, that sort of thing. There were what we called Roman candles, flower pots, volcanoes, Catherine wheels, skyrockets with parachutes, that was cool, pinwheels, screech rockets. I remember the parachute skyrockets as having a small plastic figure, like a little paratrooper, hanging off a little parachute. And the skyrocket would go off, the parachute would come out, and the little man would come down slowly, and you'd run around trying to catch it before it hit the ground. In those days, the whole neighbourhood would participate. It was a lot of fun, it really was. Now, back to us less intelligent kids. When I was, say, between 10 and 14 years old, we would buy Tom Thumbs. Now, Tom Thumbs, they are the ones that are about an inch long, and they'd be grouped or connected in about 30 or so in a line, and they'd go off one after another. Now, I believe you still see them today. You'll hear them bang, 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 one after another go off. Now, if you took the fuse out of, you separated it, you took the fuse out of one, bent it in half, and then you could light it, and that was called a fizzer. A lot of fun, but very, very short period of time. So then we separated them, and we'd say, "How tough are you?" So then we would hold a little Tom Thumb in your fingers, and you'd light it, and bang, off it would go. You'd be like, "Yeah, that was nothing." So then we get 2 Tom Thumbs, and we hold them in our fingers, and it go off. Amateur. Then we graduated from the Tom Thumb to what we called a penny bunger. I'm assuming it was called that because it cost 1 penny. Now, the penny bungers were so called because they cost a penny. Now, remember, Australia moved out to decimal currency in 1966. So in those days before, that was pennies, shillings, pounds, pence. Then it became cents and dollars. Now, we would hold the penny bunger the same way as the Tom Thumb, and then they'd let them go off. These hurt. This wasn't like a Tom Thumb. This hurt. But you'd be like, yeah, nothing, no problem. Little John Wayne there. So then we graduated to what we call the tuppenny bunger, which cost 2 pennies. Now, the tuppenny bunger was twice the size of a penny bunger. And in hindsight, this was a challenge for the extremely stupid. This is the one you could really do some damage to yourself. Now, we'd hold them between our fingers and let it drop before it went off. The longer you waited before you dropped it, the more kudos you got. So the ones that weren't particularly smart would hold on a little too long, and they're the ones that were in the hospital and the reason why they cancelled cracker night. Another fun thing that we did, actually I'm surprised I have lived as long as I have, another thing we did was to throw bungers at each other like a hand grenade. Now, of course, if you hit someone when it went off, that really wasn't a good thing. As you can imagine, these activities took place without mum and dad watching. There was no way that you could tell your parents what you were doing. And if you got hurt, your parents would say, well, what happened there? How did that happen? I don't know. No idea. Then under intense interrogation, they'd be going, you don't know. And they could smell the gunpowder or the burn they could see. And then it'd be like, oh, Mum, Dad, it must have been a faulty fuse. I don't remember, but it was definitely unavoidable. It was just an accident. And then we go and play again. Of course, they didn't believe you. You got a warning, and as soon as they weren't looking, you were out doing it again. Yeah, I really am not sure how we lived as long as we did. Now, the other fun we had was you would take a tuppenny bunger and you'd get a can, an old vegetable can, baked beans, whatever, the lid off, and you'd put the tuppenny bunger inside it. You'd mark a little groove in the ground so that you could put the wick, and then you'd light it, and then go off, and the can to go 40 feet in the air. So that was a lot of fun too. Another one was we dropped the bunger into water so it exploded just before it got wet. What a skillful bunch of kids we were. Some of the kids, so I've heard Minos, would drop these tuppenny bungers into mailboxes and pretty much blow them up. Do you remember throwdowns? I think you still have them now. Little sort of squarish or octagonal things that I think they've got like sand or something in them. And you'd walk up behind people and you'd throw them hard on the ground. They go bang, and you'd scare the people. You needed it to be thrown on bitumen or concrete, something hard. Volcanoes, that was another one that was a lot of fun today. You'd light them and I think they still use them today. Anyone else any stories to share?